Here we go. Let's review. Calculator part, obviously whole thing with the calculator. There are 12 questions total. 5 of them are multiple choice. 2 graphs that you'll have to draw. And then along with those graphs, of course, you're asked for the parts, like amplitude, period, stuff like that. And 3 solving equations. That only adds up to 10. Oh, there's 3 where you have to do maybe there's 2 where you have to do the inverse and 1 like number 4. So 1 like number 4 on this review sheet and 2 like 5 through 7. So that's pretty much the whole thing. Just like you see here, you'll have to give the period and amplitude and write the equation from a graph. Amplitude, if you need a formula, if that helps you, it's 1/2 max minus min. Just be careful, make sure you read the graph correctly. This grid is counting by 1, so that's not too bad, but you know how they are. Sometimes the grids count by 1/2 sometimes, so just make sure you have enough time. Just take your time and look at it. The amplitude on this one is 1/2 of the high, which is 2, minus -2, and we get 1/2 of 4. The amplitude is 2. The period, you want to go from high to high or from low to low, and that's really up to you, whatever you feel is easiest to kind of calculate or figure out. I'm going to go from 0, because that's easy for me, over to this spot right here, which I'm not sure what that is. Looks like a 3. And so from 0 to 3, that makes the period 3. Now, when writing the equation, you decide if you want to use sine or cosine, and then make sure you calculate b. Because there's no period in the equation, it's b. But you use the period to find b. So the formula is period equals 2 pi over b. Our period is 3. That equals 2 pi over b. We'll cross multiply. 3b equals 2 pi. Remember, you're solving for b, so we get 2 pi over 3. I'm going to go with cosine on this because I like the fact that it's looks just like cosine. It starts high right on that axis, and it goes all the way down, so that's definitely cosine. It's not even flipped over. So the amplitude is 2. I'm going with cosine. The next thing is b, 2 pi over 3. And it's not moved up or down at all. So that's it. That's the whole equation. For number 4, this is not on the unit circle because 4 and 5 are not numbers on the unit circle. So you're going to have to draw it. This is draw it. Pythagorean theorem if you need it. Cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Excuse me. Use that to label this. So this is 4, 5. Use Pythagorean theorem to find your missing side. 4 squared plus y squared equals 5 squared. Or if you already know it, then you won't need to use Pythagorean theorem. So we get y squared equals 9, and that missing side is 3. Cosecant goes with sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse from SOHCAHTOA, so this is hypotenuse over opposite. So the cosecant of our angle, which we don't know the angle, please don't find the angle, is 5 over 3. This question is a multiple choice question on the test. I believe there's either 2 or 3 of these where you're just using the inverse of your unit circle. So what angle has a tangent of 1? That's pi over 4. If you'd rather do it in degrees, it's 45 degrees. Excuse me, and then you want to do the cosine of pi over 4, so it's radical 2 over 2. Start on the inside. What angle has a sine of 1/2? That's pi over 6, which is 30 degrees. And then we're looking for the tangent of that, which is radical 3 over 3. What angle has a tangent of radical 3? Well, that's pi over 3, and then we want to do the sine of pi over 3, radical 3 over 2. All 3 of those questions were in the first quadrant. That's why they're all positive. You have only 2 graphs on the test. I just put more on here just for a little extra practice. It says to state the amplitude of each one. Period, amplitude, horizontal, and vertical shifts. On the test, it will be all kind of spelled out, like more of a fill in the blank. So you won't skip over it like I almost did. Here, your amplitude is 1. That's the number out front. Period is, because it's sine, it's 2 pi over b. Well, your b is also 2 pi. So our period is 1. It goes right 1 and also up 3. Switch this. I'm not sure how that happened where I got, sorry, it looks kind of light. Just switch it back here. We're going to go up 3. So let me move this so I have space. Some things you want to make sure you pay attention to, your labeling. Please label stuff when you write it on your axes. So I'm going to count by ones. Here's my up 3. The amplitude is 1, so I have to be able to go up to 4, and obviously down to 2. And our period is 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, halfway. We're also moving to the right 1. Bad planning on my part. Let me get rid of some of this. Don't have enough space, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, here's 1. Here's 1/2. And then I have to move to the right 1. That's 4 spaces, so I need 4 more spaces. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 2. There's 1/2. Up to you if you want to draw it and then move it, or draw it and move it all together. This one's moving all the way to 1, so please draw the graph for your answer starting at 1, not starting at 0. Now, if you want to have it start at 0, that's no problem, but you've got to show it from 1 to 2. This is sine. There's nothing special. It's not flipped over. It has regular amplitude, so it would normally start at 0, but now it's going to start here. And so you have a 0 in the beginning, middle, and end. It goes up before it goes down, but it's going to go up 1. It's also going to go down 1. And this is your sine graph. For number 9, cosine. Amplitude is 1. Remember, amplitude is always positive, even though we have a negative, so be careful on this one. We do have to reflect it. There's no place for you to answer that question. You just have to sort of pay attention to it. Period is going to be 2 pi over 2, because b is 2, so our period is pi. It's also going to go to the left, because it's a plus, pi over 2. No up or down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, there's pi. So halfway is pi over 2. So we're going to have to go 2 spaces to the left. There's negative pi over 2. You also have to show that we're going to go up and down. This thing gets reflected. Cosine would normally start high and end high. Halfway would be low, and then here would be your zeros. We're going to move that to the left 2 spaces. So each one gets moved to the left 2 spaces. Oh, we got to reflect it. Almost forgot about that. So this will be reflected down here. This high will be reflected and then moved over 2 spots. The 0 gets moved to the left. 1, 2. And then this 0 gets moved. And then this high goes over here. And this is the reflection of that graph. Secant. Secant goes with cosine. You can choose to draw the cosine or not. That's up to you. We are going to have asymptotes here. And of course, the amplitude on this is none. But when you go to draw the cosine, you want to make sure you use that amplitude of 1. Period. The b is 1. So this is 2 pi. It goes to the right. Pi over 2. It does not go up or down. So if you're asked for that vertical shift, you would have to also state none. So if you're asked for a question doesn't have one, please write none. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 pi, halfway pi. We're going to the right pi over 2, so that's 1 space. We also need to know where the 1s are, so we draw the cosine graph. So cosine starts high, ends high. Halfway it's low, and then you have your zeros. This graph has to be moved over. So I'm going to move this over to the right one space. So here's where this one goes, and then I changed the color. Hopefully that helps you see it. And then this would be here, and then this one moves over. That, of course, is not the graph. If you want to draw that in there, that's no problem at all. Now we need to come up with the secant, the reciprocal. So your zeros become asymptotes. If the point is low, you go down. When the point is high, you go up. You only draw towards your asymptotes. Number 11, I believe, is another multiple choice question. So you'll be able to select the words and then coming up with them yourself if that's maybe a little bit easier. Sorry about this, it's like slanted or something. All right, so we're starting with our parent graph. You don't have to draw it, but we're trying to describe how to get to there. There's a minus sign, so it reflects over the x-axis. There's no amplitude to talk about. The period is not different. And this is to the left too. If you'd rather use words like vertical shift or horizontal shift rather than left or right or up and down, that's up to you. But remember, it will be multiple choice. So be prepared to sort of maybe not think of it as left to, but maybe a horizontal shift left to. It might just have extra words in it. There are two questions like this. Please pay attention to the period. You are allowed to use 0. You're not allowed to use 2 pi. You are in radians. You are allowed to use the entire unit circle. So no negative angles. Things like that makes a right answer wrong, unfortunately. Here we're just going to divide both sides by 2. So we get that the tangent of x equals -1. You're also not given permission to have any kind of decimal here. It doesn't say to the nearest tenth, to the nearest hundredth. It doesn't say anything like that. So these directions are also telling you no decimals. So where does the tangent equal -1? Well, these two quadrants right here. Your angle is pi over 4, but that's not the answer. If you put pi over 4 into this quadrant, so let's make this 4 pi over 4. So if we take one away, that's going to be 3 pi over 4. This is 8 pi over 4 on this other side, so one less than that is 7 pi over 4. When you have a square, pay attention, be careful. It's either factoring or it's square root. This has only the cosine squared, so we will be taking the square root. Add 3. So 4 cosine squared of x equals 3. And divide by 4. Cosine squared of x equals 3/4. That's not a number on the unit circle, so you can sort of tell that it's not right. So we get that the cosine of x is equal to positive or negative radical 3 over 2. Radical 3 over 2 is much better for our unit circle. Because it's positive and negative, we want all 4 quadrants. Because it's radical 3 over 2, it's pi over 6. I'm just going to use my little diagram here. This would be 6 pi over 6, if that helps. One less than that, 5 pi over 6. One more than 6 makes that 7 pi over 6. Double that, that puts it over here, 12 pi over 6. And if we put one less than that, 11 pi over 6. Now we're in degrees. There's one question in degrees. Please, again, pay attention to the directions. This says no decimals. This says no negatives, and it says degrees. Cubed and squared. So we can't take the square root. We're probably going to have to factor this. So in order to factor it, just make this a little bigger. In order to factor this, we're going to have to get it set equal to 0. So the tangent cubed theta plus radical 3 tangent squared theta, I'm just adding that to the other side, equals 0. It's not 3 terms, so there's no 2 sets of parentheses. This will be greatest common factor. Be careful with greatest common factor. You are dividing. Take out as much as possible. So I'm going to take out tangent squared. When you do that, you're left with tangent here and positive sine. That's from there. And of course, we take out the tangent squared theta. You're left with radical 3. Set each one equal to 0. Tangent squared theta equals 0. Tangent of theta plus 3, radical 3 equals 0. Square root here, we get tangent of theta equals 0. There is no plus or minus for 0. So please don't do that. Tangent of theta equals negative radical 3. So where is the tangent 0? In degrees. Tangent is slope. And so we are looking at tangent being 0 right there. So this is 0 degrees and 180 degrees. Where's the tangent negative radical 3? Well, oops. All scholars take calculus. So we know we're in quadrants 2 and 4 in degrees. Now I have a hard time with this. I always have to do this in radians. This is pi over 3. Pi over 3 is 60 degrees. So if this is 180, you want to do 180 minus 60, 120. Now you'll have your calculator, so if that helps. And then you want to do 360 minus 60, so that's 300 degrees. So there's 4 answers there, not because we took the square root, but because there was 2 answers generated from each factor. All right, so this one, another squared, so we're going to take square root, so we're going to add 1 first, sorry. So 2 sine squared theta equals 1, divide by 2. Sine squared theta is equal to 1/2. Taking the square root leaves us with a radical in the bottom. So I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by radical 2. So we get the sine of theta equals plus or minus, because we took the square root, straight across the top, radical 2, straight across the bottom, plane 2. All 4 quadrants in degrees. This is pi over 4, that's 45 degrees. This is 180, so we have to do 180 minus 45, 180 plus 45, and 360 minus 45. If you're bad at that arithmetic, remember you will have your calculator. 45 degrees, 135 degrees, 225, and 315. All in degrees, little degree symbol, please. Here's a little video bonus. There's not, oh, hello, writing. There's none of these on the test. Haha. So we'll skip those. And you're welcome. Now, this is just like the first one. I just put another practice problem on here. I feel like this maybe isn't everyone's best thing. So just to give you another chance to practice. And again, kind of to see what it looks like when it's multiple choice. Hopefully the multiple choice part will help you, not hurt you. Pay attention to things like the grid, amplitude, period. Are you going to use cosine? Are you going to use sine? So here you have all of those choices to kind of confuse you. You also, remember, have a calculator, which you could draw the graph of your choice, or you could draw the graph of all of them and pick from there. Work smart, please. Let's think about this. The amplitude, this is counting by ones. So where the amplitude is 1/2, well, you can see the amplitudes are all 1. So we know the amplitude is 1. It also, like this one says that it's moved up 1. It's clearly not moved up 1. This is your midline right on the y-axis, so this is not a choice. In terms of cosine or sine, I would say this is negative cosine. So right now I'm leaning towards this answer. Because if you look at the signs, not these signs, S-I-N kind of sign, we would have to have a shift left or right to make it begin right here. That would be the first 0 for sine, or this one. So it has to shift left or right, and neither one of these have a left or right shift. So I'm going to go with 2 as my choice. But I'm also, even though I'm That's clearly the answer. I want to go back over how to calculate this pi over 2 again, just in case you want to practice that on the test. Maybe the choices are not as clear as this one. So for the period, I'm going to go from low to low. And so that looks like it landed at 4. So 4 is equal to 2 pi over b. Cross multiply. 4b is equal to 2 pi. Divide both sides by 4. And you would get that the b is pi over 2. So clearly, that's what that one says. So that's how you would calculate b. Please remember to do that on the test.